The sky turned an ominous shade of gray as dark clouds rolled in over campus that Thursday afternoon. I remember glancing out my dorm room window, watching as the first fat raindrops splattered against the glass. Within minutes, the gentle patter transformed into a deafening roar as rain hammered down, accompanied by flashes of lightning that illuminated the quad in brief, electric bursts. The wind howled through the spaces between buildings, bending trees at alarming angles and sending loose papers and debris tumbling across walkways. It was the kind of storm that made you grateful to be indoors, wrapped in the safety of four walls and a sturdy roof. I'm Alex, a junior majoring in environmental science, and this storm couldn't have come at a worse time. Finals week loomed just days away, and I had planned to spend the entire evening reviewing lecture notes and completing practice problems for my advanced ecology exam. Like most students these days, my study materials existed almost entirely in digital form. Online textbooks, shared Google Docs, and lecture recordings posted to the university's learning management system. My laptop was charged and ready, my desk organized with color-coded sticky notes marking important topics, and I had just made a fresh pot of coffee to fuel what would surely be a late night. That's when it happened. A particularly violent crack of thunder shook the building, followed by a brief flicker of the lights. For a moment, everything seemed fine, until I noticed the little Wi-Fi icon on my laptop showing the dreaded no connection symbol. I refreshed, restarted the router, and even rebooted my computer, but nothing worked. Then my phone buzzed with a campus-wide alert. Due to severe weather conditions, campus-wide internet services are currently down. Maintenance teams are working to restore connectivity. Estimated resolution time, unknown. Let me explain why this mattered so much. It wasn't just about losing access to Netflix or social media. For students like me, Wi-Fi wasn't a luxury, but a necessity. My textbooks were ebooks, my notes were stored in cloud services, and the practice exams I needed were all online. The professor had even promised to upload additional study materials that evening. Without internet access, I was effectively cut off from most of my study resources during a critical preparation period. The timing couldn't have been worse, and I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me as I contemplated how this would impact my exam performance. I paced around my small dorm room, trying to formulate a plan. The rain continued to pour outside, eliminating any possibility of walking to the library or a coffee shop off campus. I had some printed notes from earlier in the semester, but they only covered about a third of the material. As I rummaged through my desk drawers looking for anything useful, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see Eli standing there, somewhat drenched despite the short walk from his dorm building to mine. Eli was in my ecology lab section, tall, with curly brown hair that was now plastered to his forehead from the rain, and warm hazel eyes that always seemed to be smiling even when his face wasn't. We'd worked together on a few group projects throughout the semester, and there had always been something about him that made me nervous in the best possible way. Our conversations flowed easily during lab, and I caught myself looking forward to our weekly sessions more than I cared to admit. "Hey," he said, slightly out of breath. "I figured you might be freaking out about the Wi-Fi situation." He held up a thick folder bursting with papers in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. "I brought reinforcements." I couldn't help but laugh at the sight. He looked like a drowned rat, but was grinning as though he'd just had the most brilliant idea in the world. "You're a lifesaver," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "But how did you know which floor I was on?" "You mentioned it once when we were walking back from lab," he replied casually, though there was something in his expression that suggested remembering this detail might have meant more than he was letting on. Plus, I may have asked around a bit. The fact that he had gone through the effort of finding my room, in the middle of a storm no less, wasn't lost on me. As he shook the rainwater from his hair, I felt a flutter of something more than gratitude. "So," he continued, placing the folder on my desk, "I've been taking detailed notes all semester and making study guides for each unit. Everything's organized by topic, and I've highlighted the concepts Dr. Martinez emphasized in the last review session." He opened the folder to reveal meticulously organized notes, complete with color-coded sections and hand-drawn diagrams that were far more comprehensible than anything I'd seen in the textbook. "And this," he said, holding up the bottle, "is because studying is always better with a little moral support. It's nothing fancy, just a decent Cabernet. I figured we could use a study break at some point." I was genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. Here was someone who had not only prepared for his own exams, but had taken the time to think about how others might be struggling. This is amazing, Eli. Seriously. But won't you need these notes for your own studying? He shrugged. I've got digital copies on my laptop, which is fully charged. And honestly, I retain information better when I explain it to someone else. So really, you'd be doing me a favor by letting me talk through this stuff with you. Outside, the storm continued to rage, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rumbling in the distance. But inside my small dorm room, the atmosphere had shifted from one of panic to possibility. I cleared some space on my desk, pushing aside empty coffee mugs and scattered papers. Well then, I guess we're having an impromptu study session. I dug around in my mini fridge and produced some cheese and crackers. Not the most impressive spread, but it would have to do. To complement the wine, I explained, arranging them on a plate. Though I should warn you, my wine knowledge extends about as far as red goes with cheese. Eli laughed. That's already more than most college students know. I only brought wine because my mom always says it's rude to show up empty-handed during a crisis, and the campus convenience store was out of chocolate. We settled into a comfortable rhythm, spreading the notes across my desk and floor. Eli had a way of explaining complex ecological concepts that made them seem obvious, drawing connections between different systems that I hadn't considered before. As we worked through material on ecosystem dynamics, our hands occasionally brushed as we reached for the same paper, sending an unexpected jolt through me each time. The room felt smaller somehow with him in it, but not in a cramped way, more like a cocoon of focused energy. I'd turned on my desk lamp since the storm had darkened the sky prematurely, casting a warm glow over our study materials. The rain provided a soothing backdrop to our conversation, occasionally punctuated by thunder that seemed to be moving farther away. After about 2 hours of intense studying, we'd covered most of the material for the first half of the semester. My brain felt full in that satisfying way that comes from productive work. I think I need that break now, I admitted, stretching my arms above my head. My shoulders were stiff from hunching over the notes. Perfect timing, Eli said, reaching for the wine bottle. I don't suppose you have proper wine glasses hidden somewhere in this dorm room. I snorted, right next to my fine china and sterling silver. I rummaged through my cabinet and produced 2 mismatched mugs. Will these work? The blue one is chipped, but I've designated it as my wine mug. You have a designated wine mug? I'm impressed by your sophistication, he teased, taking the intact mug for himself and pouring a generous amount into my chipped one. Our fingers touched again during the exchange, and this time, the contact lingered a moment longer than necessary. We moved from my desk to sit on the floor, leaning against my bed with the notes spread around us like an academic explosion. The wine was surprisingly good, or maybe it was just the company making everything seem better. As we sipped, our conversation drifted away from ecosystem dynamics and population models. So why environmental science? Eli asked, swirling the wine in his mug like he was at a tasting instead of sitting on a dorm room floor. What made you choose this path? I considered the question, which was one I'd been asked many times but rarely answered honestly. The official answer is that I want to make a difference in conservation efforts and help develop sustainable practices, I said. Which is true, but not the whole truth. And the unofficial answer? He prompted, his eyes reflecting genuine interest. When I was 10, my parents took me camping in the Olympic National Forest. It was the first time I'd ever been somewhere so completely wild. One morning, I woke up before everyone else and just sat outside the tent, watching the forest wake up. There was this moment when the sunlight broke through the trees, illuminating all these tiny water droplets on spider webs and leaves. Everything was connected in this beautiful, complex system that existed whether humans were there to see it or not. I paused, suddenly self-conscious about my rambling. Sorry, that probably sounds ridiculous. Not at all, Eli said softly. It sounds like a moment of clarity. Those are rare. What about you? I asked, eager to shift the focus. What drew you to this field? He took another sip of wine before answering. My reason is less poetic. I grew up in a town that was basically built around a paper mill. When I was in high school, there was a chemical spill that contaminated the local river. People got sick, wildlife died, and nobody in authority seemed to care much because the mill provided most of the jobs in the area. His expression hardened slightly at the memory. I decided then that I wanted to understand these systems better, not just the ecological ones, but the human systems that impact them. How to balance economic needs with environmental protection. There was something powerful about hearing him speak so passionately. It wasn't just what he was saying, but how his whole demeanor changed. His gestures became more animated, his eyes more intense. I found myself watching his hands as he talked, the way they moved to emphasize certain points, and wondering what those hands would feel like intertwined with mine. The thought caught me off guard, and I quickly took another drink of wine to hide my sudden flush. We'd been dancing around this attraction all semester, the lingering glances in lab, the texts about assignments that somehow always evolved into conversations about music or movies or childhood memories. But neither of us had taken that step to acknowledge what was building between us. As the evening progressed and the level in the wine bottle decreased, we moved closer together, initially to look at a particularly detailed diagram of carbon cycling, but then staying there, shoulders touching, even after we'd set the papers aside. The storm outside had calmed to a gentle rainfall, tapping rhythmically against the window. "Can I ask you something?" Eli said, his voice quieter now that we were sitting closer. "Sure," I replied, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in my stomach. "Is there a reason we've never hung out outside of class before tonight? I mean, I've wanted to ask you to get coffee or something, but it never seemed like the right time." The question hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility. I could have played it safe, made a joke about being too busy with classes or having an incompatible schedule, but something about the storm, the wine, and the intimate bubble we'd created made me braver than usual. "I think I was afraid," I admitted, staring into my nearly empty mug. "Not of you, but of what might happen if we acknowledged whatever this is." I gestured vaguely between us. "Lab partners is safe. Friends is safe. Anything more gets complicated. Complicated can be good," he said, gently taking the mug from my hands and setting it aside. "Some of the most beautiful systems in nature are incredibly complex. That's what makes them resilient." I smiled at the ecological metaphor. "Are you comparing potential relationships to ecosystem dynamics?" "Maybe," he grinned. "Is it working?" Instead of answering, I found myself leaning forward, closing the small distance between us until our lips met. The kiss was tentative at first, a question being asked and answered in the same moment. His hand came up to cup my cheek, and I could feel the slight roughness of his palm against my skin. When we pulled apart, his eyes searched mine, looking for any sign of regret. "That was definitely not complicated," I said, a little breathless. "That was actually pretty straightforward." He laughed, the sound warm and rich in the small space between us. "So straightforward that maybe we should try it again? You know, for clarity's sake." The second kiss was deeper, more certain. I could taste the wine on his lips, feel the solid warmth of him as he pulled me closer. All thoughts of ecology exams and Wi-Fi outages vanished, replaced by the immediate reality of his hands in my hair and the surprising softness of his curls between my fingers. When we finally broke apart, both a little dazed, the rain had stopped completely. The sudden silence made the room feel even more intimate, as though the world outside had momentarily ceased to exist. "I should probably head back to my place," Eli said eventually, though he made no move to get up. "It's getting late, and we still have more studying to do tomorrow." "You could stay," I suggested, surprising myself with my boldness. "Just to sleep, I mean. It's still wet out there, and your building is all the way across campus." He considered this for a moment, then smiled. "I'd like that, but only if you're sure." "I'm sure," I said, and I was. Something had shifted between us, a barrier broken down by storm conditions and shared vulnerability. Whatever came next, I knew I didn't want this night to end just yet. We spent the next hour putting the study materials away, talking about everything and nothing, favorite books, childhood pets, embarrassing stories from freshman year. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by casual touches and stolen kisses that felt both new and somehow familiar at the same time. When we finally crawled into my narrow dorm bed, it was well past midnight. The single bed wasn't designed for two people, forcing us to lie close together, his arm around me and my head resting on his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong beneath my ear. "You know what's funny?" he murmured, his voice rumbling in his chest. "I've been trying to work up the courage to ask you out for weeks. If the Wi-Fi hadn't gone down, I might never have had an excuse to come over. So what you're saying is, we should thank the storm, I replied, smiling against his shirt. Exactly. Mother Nature, ultimate wingwoman. I laughed softly, feeling more content than I had in months. Outside, the clouds had cleared enough to let moonlight filter through my window, casting everything in a gentle silver glow. Tomorrow, the Wi-Fi would probably be restored, and we'd return to the world of digital connectivity and exam preparation. But something told me our connection wouldn't be lost when the internet returned. As I drifted toward sleep, warm and secure in Eli's embrace, I couldn't help but think about the unexpected paths life takes. How a storm that had initially seemed like a disaster had instead delivered something I hadn't even known I was missing. Sometimes, it takes losing one kind of connection to discover another, more meaningful one. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my window and the sound of Eli's soft breathing beside me. My phone buzzed with a notification. Campus Wi-Fi had been restored overnight. But somehow, that no longer seemed like the most important news of the day. As Eli stirred beside me, his eyes blinking open to meet mine, I knew that whatever happened with my ecology exam, this storm had brought something into my life that no amount of studying could have prepared me for, something worth far more than a perfect grade or reliable internet connection. Good morning, he said, his voice rough with sleep, but his smile as warm as ever. Ready to get back to studying? I leaned in to kiss him softly. Definitely, but maybe coffee first. He laughed, pulling me closer. Coffee first, then studying, then maybe dinner somewhere that isn't a dorm room. I'd like that, I replied, knowing that whatever came next, the storm had washed away old barriers and created space for something new to grow, something as complex and beautiful as the ecological systems we'd been studying all semester. As we lay there, planning our day in quiet voices, I silently thanked the storm, the Wi-Fi outage, and whatever stroke of courage had led Eli to my door with notes and a bottle. Sometimes the most unexpected disruptions lead to the most perfect connections. Total _char_count, 17,862.